First of all, thank you so much for purchasing my Backrooms kit. I hope you have a ton of fun with it, and if you make any renders you're really proud of, send them my way. I love seeing what you guys make. This video is going to cover a bunch of random details that I think you should know, and some great tips and tricks for building rooms with this kit. When you first open my blend file, here's what it should look like. If any of the textures are pink or missing, let me show you how to fix that real quick. First, you need to make sure and download my textures zip file. Put all those files in a texture folder for the Backrooms, and then in Blender, go to File, External Data, Find Missing Files. And here you will locate the folder containing the textures. I have it named Backrooms Textures. And then once you click Find Missing Files, it will basically fix all the bad links and connections in the texture nodes to the correct location of those files. Okay, so once your files are set up, I am Texan, which means I use the imperial system. That's right, yards, feet, and inches. I know this is super annoying for you non-Americans, but it's what I know, and it worked best for building this. So my blend file that you purchased already has the imperial system selected. However, if you're appending or using the asset browser to bring these into a new project, you might want to switch to imperial if you like the grid to line up with the shapes that I made here. Everything was very meticulously modeled to fit within certain grids of the imperial system. They're even named as such with, 3 feet, 4 feet, 8 feet, things like that, so that you know the general sizes of stuff. You can put them together if you want to make things fit nice and tight. Other measurements are pretty standard to American stuff, such as the ceiling height of 9 feet, door width and height, and other things like that. I do like to build with the snap to grid turned on, so to do that, press Shift Tab, or go up here and click on the magnet, snap, turn that on, and then make sure to go down, select increment and absolute grid snap. That really helps get the origin points of each item, which should be flat against the floor, snapping perfectly onto the intersections of the grids. You can visualize this by pressing numpad 7 to get a flat above view, turn on wireframe, and make sure the X-ray is turned on so we can see through that ceiling tile and everything below it. With our increment grid snap turned on, if I move this, it's going to snap onto each small subdivision of the major grid. If I zoom out a little bit, it's just going to snap to the larger grid there. It'll subdivide as you zoom in. But without that turned on, this is what happens. It kind of stays where it was, but moves in exact increments of 1 foot at a time. And I prefer to have a little bit more control to snap it onto the intersections easier. So yeah, that's just me. So I'm going to turn that back on. There we go. Next is if you're using the asset browser in Blender to drag and drop pieces, which I highly advise you do so. It's a lot of fun and very easy. Make sure that you turn on this little option here, Append. I found some really weird results happening in other projects when I didn't have this selected, so make sure you select that. You can drag and drop. This cube empty right here is important. Don't delete it. This is the reference point where the textures come from. Check this out. I figured out a really cool trick that I think you guys will appreciate. If I grab all of these and slide them out, what's going to happen? You're probably expecting UV problems, right? No, I'm using that empty as a reference point in the global map to basically build the texture scaling on. And it's really awesome because you can extrude stuff anywhere you want, and it doesn't destroy the UV or the placement of the textures. You can essentially just stretch, extrude, and build stuff to your heart's content, and the textures should stay perfectly intact. Now, I did find one weird oddity that if you rotate a wall piece by 90 degrees, now things are stretched on like an infinite flat plane. An easy fix is just to apply the rotation to that piece. So Control A, apply rotation, and boom, it's back to normal. I don't know why that happens. Maybe it has to do with the box triplanar unwrapping that I used in the nodes. I'm not sure. Someone smarter out there can probably help fix that, but for now, that's the best way I found to fix it. I call this Smart Materials, and this works with the ceiling tile texture as well as the floor carpet texture. So it's really easy to just stretch things out really big and not worry about screwing up the textures. This is the lovely moist yellow carpet texture for the Backrooms, and I did an interesting trick with the nodes to where it should mostly not be tiled. There's still a little bit of tiling and repeating if you get ginormous distances, but honestly, you don't really normally do this size with backroom scenes. But I did make an anti-tiling rotation node group that does some really cool tricks with the vectors, where this is the typical tile right here, but this rotates stuff randomly at different speeds so that the tiling should be less obvious. You can play with the settings if you need to, but I got a pretty decent start with these settings that you'll have in the file. One interesting aspect of my renders that I found really fun, and it adds some realism to it, is a fisheye lens. This is a typical camera setup set to 20 millimeters, and it's set to perspective mode, which is the normal rendering type. Unless you're doing a flat isometric render, this is what you'll always see. However, there is a third option here that I don't really see anyone ever talk about, the panoramic option. It's really powerful. There's a lot of cool stuff in here, and I'm going to show you how to use it to get a nice fisheye warping lens look. So you're going to click on the settings here and go to the second to last, fisheye Equisolid. Right here, you've got two settings. You got our lens millimeter, which is what you're probably used to, which is essentially your zoom, your focal length. When you drag it, it seems to limit you to 15 as its maximum, like closest distance, but you can actually just type in other numbers like 35 or 50 and get a more zoomed in look. I'm going to go to 20 and we can see the warping around the edges is pretty dramatic. That is what we're going for. The field of view is like what's rendered outside the camera view. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you want like a true fisheye, it's going to be like a circle little dot in the middle, but you know, that's not what I'm going for like that. So I'm going to go back to 20 and make sure that the field of view is just outside your camera view where you don't have any black corners like that in your final render. This gives you a really nice fisheye warping look around the edges. Speaking of fisheye and field of view, if you find that your scene is really cramped and hard to see everything, you can actually make your viewport a wider view by pressing in, go to view, and change your focal length to something wider, like 30 or 20 or, 16, really wide. And this allows you to see more and fit more in your view. It does kind of stretch things and make things a little wonky if you get too wide. But so let's just maybe stick to 35. All right, next I'm going to show you how to add ceiling light panels to your scene, stick them onto the roof perfectly, and use the array modifier to fill in a whole area without copying and pasting a bunch of light panels. So first, in my asset browser, I found my ceiling light panel. I'm just going to click and drop it onto the ceiling, period, to zoom into it. And it looks like it is upside down. I'm not sure why, but I'm going to RY 180 it. There we go. And we need to stick it in the correct spot with these tiles. So I'm going to press numpad 7, go to material view, so it's a little bit easier to see. Turn on my snap, and of course, make sure absolute grid is on. There we go. Now I can position this right there perfectly where it needs to be. Now we can use the array modifier to fill in this large empty dark area over here. And I show you a great trick for doing that and sticking to the exact measurements. Go to your wrench for modifiers, add an array modifier, and turn off relative offset and turn on constant offset. So now we can put in an exact measurement, let's say 8 feet apart. And this is going on the X. Let's do -8. There we go. Now we can turn up the number of arrayed copies we want. Cool. If we want it to be wider apart, we can do maybe -12 or -16. Stick within those number increments and you'll be fine. Things won't be overlapping weird on the ceiling tiles. And then we can add another one to go the other direction. So make another array, make it constant offset. Let's go -y. Yep. So let's do -4. Turn up the count. There we go. If it's too bright, you can make them farther apart to make less lights. Let's check it out in rendered view. Oh yeah, that is super bright. So you can, of course, turn down the emissions power, or you can just make these lights more spread out. Here's how to mirror something from one side of your scene to the other very easily. All you need is a central object to mirror this around. So I'm going to copy this wall to the other side of my scene, going to modifiers, adding a mirror. Use your mirror object as the ground, which is in the center, and change your axis. There we go. Now, anything I do to one side will be copied to the other. Great for symmetrical designs, saves you a lot of time. Alright, last thing, here's how to use my image overlays in Photoshop. The same technique should work in other programs like GIMP and Affinity, as long as they can handle layers and blend modes. So, here's a clean render right from Blender. Here's a folder with the overlays. Let's drag the interference on top, confirm the size by hitting enter. And now over here in your layers panel, if you don't see that, make sure to go to window and layers. We're going to change the blend mode from normal to screen. What screen does is it ignores all the values from 50% gray down to black. Basically, all the dark values are transparent, and anything above middle gray or 50% gray, anything brighter than that, is some level of visible, depending on how bright it is. Any white pixel will be completely opaque and visible. This is great for overlays that have elements of light and dust and particles and magic and stuff like this. Static is perfect. So if this static is a bit much, we can turn this down by just controlling our opacity. We can turn it down to 50% or maybe 30 or 40 to make it real subtle. And honestly, when it comes to VFX like this, especially the overlays and composite post work, I like to say subtlety is key. I said that in like 10 of my videos because it's so important. Don't overdo stuff. Don't go like this and be like, look guys, it's cool. Because you know what people are going to think about? They're going to think about the static. and how bad it looks because it's too much. So don't overdo stuff. Another way to make this more subtle, this next trick will apply to pretty much all overlays across the board, is use your levels or curves. I'm going to do levels by pressing Control L, and we're going to make the image darker by bringing up the black point. And now look, we still have static, but it was just less. Why? Because we're making those grays darker. The whites are staying white, but the grays and middle grays are getting darker and darker as we bring this handle up to the right. We can also play with the middle value too to make like it really washed out, which looks terrible. We'll bring this in to dial it back a lot, or we can get some real contrast going on like this. We can get some really harsh static in certain areas. Let's do a few more. I got some damage here. Enter to confirm the size. Put it on screen mode. Awesome. So these damage layers are more digital artifacts. I don't think this happens with analog too much, but this is a very digital look. So you can do some really cool stuff with the blend modes with this. Instead of using screen, I'm actually going to just use my arrows to scroll down through the blend modes and see what happens with each one. They have slightly different effects because they handle light differently. That color dodge is pretty nice and subtle. So putting this really low at 11% to me looks pretty believable. Like these are like weird, compression artifacts in the tape or the video that are happening, and maybe even layer some others of different sizes and types. I'm going to put this one also on color dodge and down really low, like 15%. Cool. And then maybe layer some noise on top of this. Put that at screen mode and we'll drop that down to about 50. And then let's get some scan lines or interference bars. These are cool. And screen, you can leave those at full opacity. Awesome. So all together, these kind of build up a certain look. Play with them, customize them, find combinations that you like, and try to have a little story behind it. Don't just throw things together to look cool. Imagine what kind of camera the person would be using in the back rooms, what kind of electromagnetic interference would be interfering with the recording, and all that stuff, so that there's a little bit of thought put behind stuff instead of it looks cool and I like it. The Backrooms has a whole lot of lore. Thank you so much for watching this video and for buying my product. I hope you have fun with it. Have a great week.